A few days ago, I made a video about Starfield Shattered Space, and while I was critical, I was also quite tame. I assumed it would come out, no one would really care, it would just get ignored, we'd all move on. It certainly wouldn't bring anyone back to the game, but the dozen or so players who are still there, they'd probably enjoy it, they might have a good time, and that'd sort of be it. We'd just forget about Starfield again. Well, I was kind of wrong, because the reaction, it was universally negative. It was overwhelmingly negative. I really didn't expect it. I just thought Bethesda couldn't be that incompetent, that they'd actually make Starfield even worse, make people hate it all that more. But that's kind of what's happened. It kind of felt like that Bethesda releasing this DLC, it reminded people that Bethesda exists, that Starfield's still a thing. And that just annoyed people. It frustrated people, and they made their voice heard, and it started the conversation all over again of how awful is this company now? Past their prime, totally useless. And when it comes to Elder Scrolls 6, which is their next major project, how could anyone possibly be excited for it? I mean, there is no major studio I can really think of that is past its prime more than Bethesda. Maybe BioWare. And you might have noticed I've made a video or two that was negative about the upcoming Dragon Age The Veilguard, but at least that's like a full release, and even though it has all the tonal problems and a lot of things that I really do not like, it'll probably be released, it'll be a full game that feels like maybe some of the older ones, and their reputation might raise just that little bit further than Bethesda's. Bethesda will be seen as the lowest of the low, the laughingstock that no one cares about, not even for the Elder Scrolls 6, which at one time would have been the most anticipated game of all time. There's no real reason now to be hopeful for it. I mean, at the end of the day, the Elder Scrolls, it's basically just like the sword and sorcery version of Fallout, of Starfield in some ways. It's not drastically different. It doesn't have like all these unique things that only the Elder Scrolls has, and once Bethesda get back to that, everything's just gonna be rosy, hunky-dory, it's just gonna be incredible. I don't think that they can really fix the problems that have been plaguing their recent games, and this is an issue that dates back to like Fallout 4. Really, they haven't done anything that's been universally loved since Skyrim, so you're going, it's gonna be 15, 16 plus years until Elder Scrolls 6 comes out. So that's a long stretch of time where they haven't done a lot of note. Like Fallout 4, it reviewed well the mainstream critics, but I think there was just that underlying feeling of disappointment. And the only reason it was critically praised and fans sort of, oh, it's all great, Fallout 4, it's incredible, but really everyone's thinking it's not as good as their prior games. It was just because of the reputation. Back then, Bethesda were today's From Software. Larian, they had that reputation back then, so people were a bit more optimistic. Now, all of the problems with their titles, they're going to be under the microscope, and none of those problems are going to go away. The engine, the loading screens, the writing, the combat, almost all these just like particular features that you'd find in an RPG, Bethesda basically do all of them poorly compared to other developers right now, except for maybe the open world exploration. And Shattered Space was meant to be their chance to show everyone they've still got it. This was going to be like their No Man's Sky moment, Cyberpunk, when it was eventually fixed. It was going to show, yes, we can still make one planet, the exploration will be fantastic, we'll recapture the magic. Well, that didn't happen. Shattered Space is hated possibly even more than the base game. Mostly negative reviews on Steam, 30% pathetic. If you go to Metacritic, for instance, even the mainstream critics, who are usually just complete shills, no integrity, they're matching the user score, 58. There was a day where critics wouldn't dare to give a Bethesda game under like a 90. Like they were almost on Nintendo's level, where it doesn't matter what they did, they would still get amazing critical reviews. And it's funny, I mentioned Fallout 4, like there was a lot of critics giving it 10 out of 10s, and these days they'll be like, oh gee, there were a lot of bugs, there was a lot of clunkiness writing problems with that game. It's like, you gave it a 10 out of 10 though, so why did you say it was perfect back then? You didn't. You were shilling. Now you've changed your tune because you've got permission to call them out, to make fun of them. So basically, they've got no reputation. Everyone's expecting the worst for their next game, for Elder Scrolls 6. That certainly includes the fans. Like, when Elden Ring, for instance, or even Baldur's Gate 3, these sorts of up-and-coming games, everyone was talking about them. There was online discussion, theorizing, all this sort of stuff. There's crickets for the Elder Scrolls 6. People aren't doing that. It's basically hopium of, a Bethesda maybe not going to screw it up? Is it maybe going to be good? What do you reckon? Is there a chance? It's just kind of that. It's not even really coping. People are beyond that because we exhausted all of our cope with Starfield. Even though there were red flags, it didn't look good when it was shown. People like me thought, no, I know it doesn't look good, but none of Bethesda's games ever look good when you first see them. When you jump in and you have that experience, oh, it's so immersive. So red flags were clearly ignored by a lot of people, again, me included. Fallout 76, I remember the announcement trailer where Todd was hyping it up and we were thinking, what is this 76? Are they following up Fallout 4, a brand new single-player entry already? I couldn't contain my excitement. Everyone was pumped. And it was a multiplayer title. It was a total mess. A joke. That was the laughing stock of 2018. So we've exhausted our cope. So people aren't even really pretending anymore with the Elder Scrolls 6. And there's plenty of examples. For instance, here on the Elder Scrolls Reddit, are people genuinely excited for the Elder Scrolls 6? Like, how can you be after Starfield, Shattered Space? No one's really bothering to argue with him, pretty much just saying, yeah, there's probably not much reason to expect it to be good. Where do you think Bethesda could go wrong in the Elder Scrolls 6? Well, how about they just focus on getting one thing right? That's my challenge to them. After Starfield, where literally everything is wrong, some people say, oh, the shipbuilding was pretty good though, but there's nothing to do in your ship. So what's the point? I challenge Bethesda, one thing right, one aspect of an RPG, do it correctly, and you'll be moving forward in an uphill direction. You'll be doing better than some of your previous games. Given how bad Starfield is, does anyone else have concerns about the Elder Scrolls 6? And the top comment is, people really act like they made a Golem tier game. Holy fuck. Well, I've got to say, in the context of mainstream games, Starfield kind of is a Golem tier game. Like, the reviews are very similar. Like, you look at the Shattered Space reviews compared to Golem, Golem is probably doing better. I don't know if maybe more people played Golem as well, possibly. Almost no one came back for Starfield, and a lot of people already owned it. I own it. Lots of people owned it when they were sucked in and ordered the super-duper version that had it in there. You got it as great value, apparently. And there's a comment here, which I think really sums up where a lot of people now are with the Elder Scrolls Bethesda games in general. It reads, meanwhile, thinking Skyrim was so great. I mean, was it really great? Each Elder Scrolls game after Morrowind was a downgrade. I expect the next one to continue that pattern. So again, it's just people now looking back, after they've sort of had the illusion of Bethesda being competent, being these great developers, now that that has been broken with 76, with Starfield, people look back and they realize this company is hopeless and their games have just been getting worse. Why would I be excited for the Elder Scrolls 6 given this trajectory? There's no reason to. And obviously these are just random Reddit posts that I've found. Maybe I'm totally wrong about the perception towards this game. Maybe there's communities out there full of optimism, full of these people who can't wait to see Todd Howard make his big comeback. Swen at Lari and Miyazaki at From Software, very soon they'll be seen as has-beens when Todd reclaims the throne and shows everyone what the Elder Scrolls 6 could be. Maybe there's people out there who think that's going to happen, but I can't find them. And ignoring all of this crap, think of the developers themselves and what they're saying, because the delusion within Bethesda is possibly the worst part of this. Like, if they were taking the feedback seriously, firstly to 76, because I sort of thought they're listening, they're making Starfield more of an RPG. Remember getting excited when it was like no voice protagonist, and you saw some of the choice making, and you thought, wow, they're sort of improving over Fallout 4, they're going back to their roots a little bit, you got pumped and disappointed extremely quickly. None of that really mattered. But the feedback that's been given, which could it be more clear? Like the reviews, the user reviews are awful. Now even the mainstream critics have deserted them. You'd think maybe it's time for some reflection to go back to our strengths. No, these people double down. The first thing I'll mention is a designer who worked there 3 years ago. He's left, but he's been around the recent culture. So I think that this is how the studio kind of thinks. He said in an interview a few weeks ago that it's going to be almost impossible for the Elder Scrolls 6 to meet fan expectations. Marketing departments just put their heads in their hands and they're weeping because everyone's going to be complaining, apparently. Like, that sort of attitude already, it's sad. From a developer who used to, they aim for the skies, you can climb every mountain, you can do everything in our games, and now, before they even started on the game probably, it's moaning, groaning about toxic fans, they're never going to be happy. Just make a good game, and the truth is, like, expectations, they're going to be high, but they should look at this as an opportunity, because Starfield and its DLC are so bad that just producing even a solid enough game, even if it does feel like 15 years old, if it's literally just Skyrim again, no real innovations, they just do that, it's going to be received better than Starfield was. So really the expectations have gone down for them. They should be thanking the team behind Starfield. They made this an easier job, though we all know that they're still going to fall flat on their faces. This one is far worse, though, because that guy had left. He's not an active developer. This is genuinely awful, though. Bethesda's lead writer, who said Starfield is the best game the studio has ever made. And, of course, it's Emil Pagliarolo, who everyone has wanted to see fired for, like, 15, 20 years or something. He seems to have been there forever, and you all have experienced this, where you work at a company and there's someone there who they've been in the trenches, they have the long history, but they're fucking useless at their job. They do nothing, but no one does anything about it because it's, oh, I've been here a long time, I'm friends with the boss, I can just put my feet up. I've done my part, I've done my work, I did that 10 years ago. Now I can just rest on my laurels and I still keep my senior title, all the cushy stuff. That's Emil, totally useless, a hack, no fans, no one appreciates his work, and then he still just fails upwards, and he's a lead writer on just about everything. People talk about Far Harbor, Fallout 4 DLC, and how the writing was actually good. I don't think Emil was part of that, or at least he wasn't the lead writer or anything, and then you see the difference. It's actually somewhat decent. This guy is useless. Get him out. And just forgetting this guy for a second, Todd Howard. He's probably the last name at Bethesda that commands some sort of respect. I mean, that's probably debatable now, but iconic name in mainstream RPGs, whatever. Todd Howard, I'm just not convinced that he's been involved in, like, the day-to-day operations of gaming for a long time. Like, my imagining what he actually does at Bethesda, it's more sort of okaying or saying nah to decisions. And that's basically it. Outside that, kind of a marketing person, just sort of a senior guy within the business. I really don't think him by himself, like, he destroyed Starfield and made all of these different calls. I don't think he's involved to that extent anymore. He's obviously getting a bit older. He's probably only got a game or two left at the company, but clearly he's not making a difference. Him there or not, I don't think it's going to affect the quality of these games. And you just have to think, no company really sort of lasts the test of time. Like, they all have their peak and then they decline. Even forgetting companies, like a sports team, they have their peak where they win all the trophies, and then they turn to shit and they become a joke. If you're into music, there's probably bands out there that you like, their first couple of albums, brilliant, incredible, you immerse yourself in everything, and then they just turn total rubbish, and their music gets totally commercialized, they lose all of the heart and soul, and they're garbage. They're just relying on their old stuff. They play their greatest hits. That's basically Bethesda, the new so-called talent that is coming in. They're clearly not up to snuff. They're not good enough. They can't make good games. And that's not only Bethesda. Like, this is happening everywhere. Like, a lot of these companies, they're new people coming in and joining the industry. They're just not very good at what they do. And in an ideal world, given they were bought by Microsoft, if Microsoft were competent, if they knew what they were doing, at least in the gaming space, they could have fixed some of this. Because the IPs, they're not all just magic because of Bethesda. We saw that with Fallout New Vegas. You give the Fallout IP to a better developer, they do fantastic work with it. But then Bethesda, oh no, we need to be very protective of our IPs because we're so amazing. Clearly not. Microsoft should have taken the IPs from them. At the very least, Fallout, like 5 years ago when they bought them, and gave them to almost anyone else on their portfolio. They could have given it to anyone and we would have at least got something that would be better than whatever Bethesda were doing now. Microsoft, asleep at the wheel, as they always are. Now, who knows what's going to happen with these IPs? Fallout TV show comes out, no game, nothing. Microsoft, terrible owner. I wish someone else had have bought them or new management had have gone to Bethesda and they didn't get bought at all. I hate all the consolidation. It's not good for gaming. I'll say just lastly, the engine stuff. So I was going to talk a bit about, oh, will the Elder Scrolls 6 be on Unreal Engine 5? Will there be all these changes? Does it really matter? Like, if we're truly honest with ourselves, if Bethesda moved to Unreal Engine 5, it's not going to fix all of these things. Like, they're going to have a ton of trouble getting up to speed with the new engine. You'll lose maybe some of the few benefits left, like the modding scene will be almost non-existent, like it is for a lot of games on Unreal. It's not going to be like Skyrim, the Fallout games, where you can do these crazy mods, convert the whole game Fallout London style. Just won't happen with Unreal 5. It won't be as easy. And then, what are you really going to be left with? Because Bethesda, like, genuinely, they're basically rubbish at everything, except in the past, the exploration, the world design. That's now debatable. Shattered Space, they could have shown that they still at least had that. They didn't. They really have nothing. If they can't at the very least get the exploration right, handcrafted world, that is actually going to be the end of them. They're basically going to be like a C-tier developer who puts out games with mixed reviews critically and with players, and no one's going to buy them anymore. Maybe a last bit of nostalgia, milk the cow with the Elder Scrolls name, that's going to be it. So I don't even want to really theorize on engine changes and so on, because what's the point? Who cares? Whether it's the same or a new engine, it's going to be the same old Bethesda. It's going to be hopeless. And yes, it all sounds negative and doomer and everything, but I think it's just fine to acknowledge that Bethesda, like I think BioWare, they're just past it, and you're just going to have to look elsewhere for that same experience. Whether it's with modders, if you really just love like that feel of Bethesda-type games with the creation engine, modders will fill some of that gap. And there's plenty of indie companies. Again, you've had the Larians and the From Software sort of rise from the ashes and be like that modern, great mainstream developer. CD Projekt Red to an extent, if you like that real sort of AAA feel. The Witcher 4 will probably be okay. It'll be better than the Bethesda titles at the very least. So there's going to be decent stuff out there. It's just not going to come from Bethesda anymore. The king is dead, Todd being the king, and we'll leave it there. Thanks for listening. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.